All right, example 4. How do I solve by factoring out the greatest common monomial? All right, so we in a previous example had tried to do the 3x squared plus 15x is equal to 0 by doing the fence problem, and we were not able to solve it. So now let's go ahead and take a look at if we factor out a common monomial, if then we're able to solve it. So if I look at 3x squared and I have plus 5x, I can factor out an x. And then I would have left 3x plus 5, and now is equal to 0. So now we're able to solve, and I have the x, I'm going to take this x here, is equal to 0. And then I need to solve my 3x plus 5 is equal to 0. And so we're going to minus the 5, and we have 3x is equal to negative 5. And then when we divide by the 3, we have x is equal to negative 5 all over 3. And so we have two answers here. We have the x is equal to 0 or x is equal to negative 5 all over 3. And you have to have both of these and separated with the word or. All right, so for number 2, we have 2x squared plus 8x. Well, so I can factor out a 2 and 1x. And I'll be left with an x right here, and I'll have plus 4. And then this is equal to 0. All right, so when I have 2x is equal to 0, I divide by 2, and x is equal to 0, or I have my x plus 4 is equal to 0. I'm going to minus the 4. X is equal to negative 4. So you have 0 or negative 4. All right, so for our next one, we have 6n squared is equal to 15n. First of all, let's go ahead and get everything on one side, and then we're going to have it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract this 15n from both sides. And we'll have 6n squared minus 15n is equal to 0. All right, so now we need to look and see what can we factor out. Well, it looks like we can factor out a 3 and an n, which will leave me with a 2n minus 5 is equal to 0. So we have 3n is equal to 0, so that's n is equal to 0. Or let's do our 2n minus 5 is equal to 0. Or we'll add 5 and divide by 2, n is equal to positive 5 all over 2. All right, so for 4x squared is equal to 2x, we're going to do the same thing, where we're going to minus the 2x and set it all equal to 0. So a 4x squared minus 2x is equal to 0. And we're looking at the 4x squared and the 2x, and it looks like 2x will go into both. So I have 2x, and I'm going to have I'll have a 2x left here, and now I have that full 2x, so I'm going to minus 1 here. So I need something to hold that, the place there, so is equal to 0. And so I'll have, all right, so we'll continue solving. So I'm going to have 2x is equal to 0, meaning xn will be equal to 0. And then I'll have 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. And so I'll have x is equal to, I'll add the 1 and divide by 2, so 1/2. So, and again, you have to have it split by the or. So x is equal to 0 or x is equal to 1/2. All right, so let's take a look at this next one. Again, I'm going to minus a 13g on both sides. So I'll have negative 39g squared minus 13g is equal to 0. Now make sure that when you factor out here, you're going to want to factor out the negative with that. We're just going to take negative 13, and I'll have g times, and then I'll have 3g, and then now when I factor out that negative, the whole negative is coming with, so I have to have a positive 1 is equal to 0. All right, so negative 13g is equal to 0, meaning g is equal to 0. Or you have 3g plus 1 is equal to 0, or g is equal to negative 1/3, because you'd minus the 1 and divide by 3. All right, one more in this section. We're going to then, let's say maybe this one I want to add, the 18h squared. It doesn't matter, just showing that it does not matter which side you do. So I'd have 0 is equal to 18h squared minus, oops, this should have been an h, minus 45h. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to factor out. I can factor out a 9 and an h, so that's going to be equal to 2h minus 5. All right, so 9h is equal to 0. And so, all right, h is equal to 0. And then we have our 2h minus 5, that's equal to 0. And that means that h is going to be equal to 5 all over 2. So we have OR. All right, so how do I solve real-world polynomials? We're going to take a look at the vertical motion model. And what we use this for is when things are falling. So let's go ahead and talk about the parts of this formula. When you have the h, that is the height. And that we measure in feet. And then we have our t, which represents our time, and that we measure in seconds. And then we have the vt, which is, this right here is the initial velocity. This is how fast it's at the time that when it's moving. So we measure this by feet per second. All right, and then this s represents the starting height. And that too is measured in feet. All right, so let's take a look here. All right, so a startled armadillo jumps straight into the air with an initial velocity of 14 feet per second. After how many seconds does it land on the ground? So let's go ahead and start out with our initial, so we have 0, and then we're going to have negative 16 because that is the gravity. That's going to be standard there. And then we have t squared. And then plus, now we've got that initial velocity of 14. So our 14t, and then, and because it's going to land on the ground, it's going to be then plus 0. And usually, oops, I'm sorry, we would usually not write that. So let's go ahead and simplify this. I'm going to have 0 is equal to, I'm going to factor out a negative 2t times 8t minus 7. And so our t can be 0, or our t can be equal to 7 all over 8. And what this represents, it's 7/8 of a second back on the ground. All right, our next one we have a dolphin jumped out of the water with an initial velocity of 32 feet per second. After how many seconds did the dolphin enter the water? Again, you're going to start with your 0 is equal to, and we have our negative 16t squared. And then it's at a 32 feet per second plus 32 feet per second. And again, entering, it's like back on the ground, so we're going to plus 0. All right, so we're going to have 0 is equal to, here we're going to factor out a negative 16t, and I'll have t minus 2. All right, so t is going to equal to 0, and then t is going to be equal to 2 seconds back on the ground. So in this lesson, we took a look at how to solve polynomial equations by factoring first.